everyone. What life is like? Well, life is really exciting right now for me because I'm the criminal presiding judge this year and last year as well. And so I have the heaviest calendar of all the judges in San Mateo County. I've been on the bench for 21 years. I've done everything. It's been super fun. I've been privileged to do family law, civil cases, criminal cases, traffic and small claims, all kinds of LPS cases, just really a lot of different things. But now, as the criminal presiding judge, I handle all of the felony matters, which are all of the serious crimes, basically from when they start to the day of trial. And on the day of trial, I give it one last shot to try to resolve them. And then they go off the trial if they're not resolved. So we have thousands of cases that I hear every year. They come to me for arraignment in the morning, and then I do pre-trials in the afternoon, which is really super interesting. The lawyers are frankly the best of the best who are handling the felony criminal cases. And I really enjoy working with the lawyers on both sides, both the defense attorneys and the prosecution attorneys, the deputy DAs. We have excellent probation officers that we work with for probation violations, for mandatory supervision violations. And then if all else fails, we have a hearing or we go to trial. But in my time on the bench, I started as a commissioner back in January of 2000, and I was doing traffic and small claims cases, very fun. It's really where you see most of the public. And I learned a lot about being a judge and about temperament being very super important, being very even tempered, being respectful to all of the parties on both sides. And then moved on to doing criminal and then family law. And I spent 8 years doing family law. And family law is one of the more difficult assignments, not in the amount of time you spend necessarily, although it is also very difficult, but it's not as bad as criminal presiding judge. But it's difficult in the sense that you're dealing with people who are very emotionally distraught usually, either about the divorce or about what's happening with their children or the money. And so it's difficult to keep things calm in the courtroom, but after a while you find a way to do that. And so I enjoyed doing family law for about 8 years. Then I did civil law and motion cases, which were also very, very interesting. Again, you get some of the best attorneys who fly out from all over the United States to come into your courtroom and argue, which is for me a little bit intimidating because they're so smart, but I really enjoyed that process as well. And had a really good time just getting to know some of the civil attorneys that practice in San Mateo County. And then finally, now I'm here as criminal presiding judge. One thing I can say is that I wanted to be a judge for a very long time, since the 5th grade. And I figured out that I needed to be a lawyer first. So when I got to Hastings, which is where I went to law school, like all of you, I first thought I was going to be a tax attorney because I had majored in both math and economics with an emphasis on accounting when I was at CMC for college. And I took one tax class and decided that wasn't for me, and then fell in love with litigation. So I started my career as a deputy district attorney for about 4 years. Loved doing that. Lots of trial experience, lots of time in the courtroom, super fun, super rewarding. Just nothing's better than being in jury trial, in my humble opinion. And then moved on to do civil and cases on the defense for criminal cases. And after doing that, moved on to the bench. So it's been a great career. I've loved it every step of the way. I hope that's a good intro.
That's wonderful, Judge Greenberg. Judge Simons, how about you? How's life on the appellate bench?
I would say that life on the appellate bench is very different than life on the trial bench. And I take my hat off to Susan. It has just been a very, very difficult year for all of our trial courts. Why don't I do this, Scott? Let me kind of invert the order that Susan took and start off with where I began my career right after law school. and I began in New Orleans clerking for a federal district judge, and have often remarked that that was the single most important year, I think, of my career, single year of my career. And so recommend it certainly to your students as something to do. Whether or not they do it in New Orleans, of course, is a different question. I then worked for a couple of years for a corporate firm in San Francisco, and then woke up one morning and remembered that the reason I had always wanted to be a lawyer was because I always wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. And so left the law firm in San Francisco and went across the bay to Contra Costa County, where I became a public defender. And to this day, that remains the job that was probably the more fun than any other job I've had. I don't mean to say I enjoyed it more necessarily, because I've enjoyed each job I've had. But as Susan already noted, trying jury trials was just an amazing experience. I remember, independent of trying jury trials, describing to people what being a public defender was spending the entire morning arguing with people, then at lunch, having lunch with my friends and telling them how I won all these arguments in the morning, and then spend the afternoon arguing with a whole different set of people. So definitely enjoyed that, and then became a trial court judge in 1980, a mere 40 years ago. Actually, a little more than 40 years ago. And I've split the time between, on the bench, about half in the trial court and half in the Court of Appeal. And very, very different jobs. Were you trying to say something, Scott?
No, go ahead.
No. Yeah. Very, very different jobs. In the trial court, I, among other things, I enjoyed having a lot of contact with the attorneys, and handled very different subject matter at different times. Did criminal, did civil, and did family law. Not for quite as long as Susan, but for enough time to realize what a terrific job most family law lawyers do, and they typically don't get as much credit as they deserve for that. In 2001, Governor Davis appointed me to the Court of Appeal, and one of the advantages, of course, being on the Court of Appeal versus the trial court is we have the time and the resources that the trial courts don't have to deal with the challenging legal questions that come up. As a trial court judge, it was not uncommon that I'd be assigned a case. The lawyers for that case and the case file would arrive at the same time. And at the same time, as I would get a call from the presiding judge saying, Mark, by the way, your jury is here. Are you ready to have them come up? And I would say, gee, Doug, I'd love to have them come up, but I've got to resolve these 6 in limine motions before that happens. And the PJ would say, okay, Mark, so I'll tell them they'll be ready in about 15 minutes. Well, it helped to be a quick study on legal issues to be a trial court judge. And those issues would get resolved, the jury would come up, and the case would be tried. On the Court of Appeal, I will face fewer legal issues than I did and would have faced on the exact same case if I was still in the trial court. I'm not expected to resolve them within 15 minutes. In fact, I have an enormous amount of time if I need it. I have 2 lawyers who work only for me, helping me resolve it. The resolution always consists of a written opinion that 2 of my colleagues must join in, or at least one of them must join in order for the opinion to be issued. So the resources available are enormously different. I have not been into my office since March 9th, 2020. The difficulty I had in getting on Zoom this morning, luckily, has not been duplicated very often, because we do an enormous amount of our work on a Zoom or a related platform called Blue Jeans. And we do oral argument on Blue Jeans. I am able to, communicate with my attorneys and my other panel members, read the briefs. Almost all of our files are now electronic, and I can do all of that from home, something that quite obviously trial court judges are not always able to do. I'm curious, Susan, are you able to do much of your work away from the office or not?
So last year, like you, I think my last day in the office was around March 12th, and I was home through the end of December. I sentenced defendants. I sentenced felony defendants on Zoom, and I did all of my orders and all of my mail type work electronically. So I could sign things electronically. I could review pleadings. We have everything now electronic. I couldn't handle the larger calendars. They just moved too fast. I tried for a couple of weeks doing that 100% on Zoom, and it was very difficult for courtroom staff. So I went back to basically handling sentencings and all the electronic orders. But then, of course, while I was working from home, I also filled in for the law and motion judge for about a month, and did things like that, helped out on some family law cases. So even now we have a hybrid model where I would say at least half of our people are on Zoom. Most of the defendants are on Zoom, in or out of custody, which helps a lot with transportation issues from the jail. And our lawyers are maybe 50-50. Some are on Zoom, some come in. So it works out really well.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to make the best of it with Zoom, and some things work just fine, and some are more challenging. I wanted to acknowledge one more guest who has joined by audio. So I'll ask if that person can unmute and speak up and maybe say a few words about life as a judge. Let's see if I can get that person to.
Well, Professor, this is Ed Davila, and I'm here on the screen. I don't know if that's who you were.
Oh, that's great. You're on the screen. Let me go ahead and spotlight you. You managed to get in after all, huh?
I did, and you'll see the name there. It's Cella, and that I had to summon my daughter.
Oh no!
I'm using her account.
I wonder if it's something with something with the .gov, or I don't know.
I think it might be, yeah.
And I think
that's what maybe that explains it.
Yeah, and I think Judge. See, I think we have one more judge who's on the phone, and I'm trying to get her to.
Is that Judge Corley, my colleague, Judge Corley?
Yeah, Corley. Well, Judge Davila, why don't you say a few words about what life is like as a federal district judge?
Well, sure. Thank you very much. And I apologize for the problems. As you can see, not all federal district court judges are fluent with the technology that we have now. That's one thing that's going on. And I'm not going to say anything about the good justice here, but apparently his fluency is comparable to mine. But Nice to hear from you, Mark, and glad to hear your voice.
And I feel the same. That is the daughter you referred to, the daughter who worked with my daughter?
Exactly, she is indeed. And
Yes.
Justice Simon and our daughters worked together in Adam Schiff's office in Washington, D.C. Our daughter was doing an externship there for a semester. And I think Emily is still the communications director, I think, for the representative.
Yes.
Yeah.
She is, although she's applying for a job in the administration. So we'll see how.
Oh, good for her. Good for her. Well, so it's nice to see everyone here. And as you can see from our exchange, the legal community actually is quite small and it is quite intimate. And when you get out in practice, you will recognize that, I think, that your colleagues and student friends, as you progress in your careers, it'll be quite normal for you to have your friends and colleagues advance in law firms, perhaps if they decide to get into government, move into government work, administrative work, and onto the bench. And I expect that Hastings will continue. I think it still leads the state in representatives on the state court bench. So we expect that many of you will be on the bench as well. I graduated from Hastings in 1979. Yes, there was a law school back then. And I sought a career in the public defender's office. And I went to the public defender's office and worked there for about 9 years and then left for private practice with another PD. And I was a friend of mine, I was in private practice for a number of years. And then much like Judge Simons, I was appointed to the Superior Court bench in 2001 by Governor Davis. And I sat there for about 10 years. And then in about 2001, President Obama nominated me to the district court. And I got that job. And I sit in San Jose in our Northern District of California. We have, there's Judge Corley. We have a courthouse where Judge Corley sits. In San Francisco on Golden Gate, just a stroll, a wonderful stroll down Golden Gate from your lovely school. Judge Corley sits there. We have a courthouse in Oakland, and then we have our San Jose courthouse, and that's where I sit with two other district court judges. And we handle just the thing about, I think the thing that I really appreciate about my current job and current spot in federal court is just the diversity of cases we get. They're just fantastic cases. And they're the kind of cases that all of you struggled with in procedure. I mean, really, it's true. Your civil procedure, I just want you to know your civil procedure class, you might think, who cares about Rule 15? And why do we have to learn about Rule 11? And what's this 12B nonsense? Let me tell you, it is the real deal. Judge Corley will, I think she will agree with that. All the things you learned in civil procedure, they will come to fruition when you get into court. I recall when I was a new judge sitting and there was an argument, a new judge in federal court, and the parties were arguing this, and I thought, God, this sounds familiar. What are they talking? Wait a minute, this sounds so familiar. And then the lightning bolt hit, and I said, oh, this is Erie. This is Erie problem. Oh my God. Wow, it's true. It actually does. They still talk about this. So I just tell you that it is refreshing. But the cases we see, Judge Corley and I see in the trial court, and that's where we are, as you heard Judge Simons talk about the appellate court, are very different. We're in the trenches, so to speak, with Susan, Judge Greenberg, and we get the pleasure of hearing the motions, hearing the trials, and making those decisions that trial judges make. And then, of course, we all believe in review, and we all believe that there's review, and the Ninth Circuit grades our papers. And when there's an appeal, the Ninth Circuit will look at our case, and sometimes our cases find their way up to the Supreme Court. But I thoroughly enjoy my job. Let me just say one more thing about Hastings before I turn it over back to Professor, and we can hear from Jackie. Hastings is, I enjoyed my time there. Oddly enough, in 1978, 79, when I was there, there was construction going on as well. And we were tortured by the construction of what's now the old building, but the building you're in, it was new for us. We suffered through the pile drivers and all of that stuff in our final exam. So I think I know what you're going through now. I should, one other thing that provides other opportunities. My wife is a class of 81, and she and I met together in Hastings, but we met again in the public defender's office. So you never know, romances can exist, you know. That's another value added of law school, I suppose. And I should tell you, my daughter, whose name you see there, and Jackie, I'm using her Zoom account because I couldn't figure mine out. She is a 1L at Hastings. And so our family tradition continues, I suppose. But I'm glad she was home. She's at home now. She's going to move to the city in about 2 weeks. But she's home now, so I could go grab her out of her bedroom and say, get me on this. Do what you have to do. And she slapped her forehead 5 times. I'm happy to join you, but happy to answer any questions after that. That's my brief story. Thanks.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Corley, I'm so glad you were able to join us, and I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but maybe you could talk for just a couple of minutes about what life is like as a federal magistrate judge, and you're on mute. You're on mute. Judge Corley, you're on mute.
There we go.
There you go.
Good morning. I think we're running into these difficulties because we're Zoom Gov accounts. And
Yeah.
so when we try, and so I think that's what happened. I created a Zoom US and all that. Here I am. Welcome. Good morning. And it's kind of ironic because I'm on Zoom every single day. For the past year, been pretty much in court every day on Zoom. I just issued an opinion on Friday. I did a virtual bench trial and all that. So really, anyway, here I am. So I'm a magistrate judge, one of Judge Davila's colleague. And as a magistrate judge, we're a little bit different. We're not appointed by the president. I like to say we're appointed by the people who are appointed by the president. And we have 8-year terms and then can be re-upped. I'm now I'll have been a magistrate judge for 10 years come May. And I have a little bit of a non-traditional background for making it to the bench. Right out of law school, I clerked for a federal judge, then I worked at a big firm in Boston, and I moved to San Francisco. I worked at a mid-size firm, and one of the partners whom I was working at that firm, Chuck Breyer, was nominated by Clinton to the federal bench when I was pregnant with my second child. We got, and my other child was not even 2. We got to talking, and having clerked, we decided I would leave the practice and I would come join him as his, I like to call it indefinite law clerk, to help him set up his chambers because I had done it before. And I said, I'll stay for about 4 years and help you get started. Anyway, I ended up staying for 11 and a half years as his career clerk, primarily because it was such an interesting job, but also he at least gave me great flexibility, and that I was able to manage really balancing having 2 small kids and doing the job. When I started out, I would just come into chambers 3 days a week and 2 days at home. Then when my daughter started kindergarten, I came in 5 days, but pretty much 5 short days. I drop her off at school. I'd come to the chambers, and then I'd pick her up when school was out. And I still had I was still full time. I still had half the docket and did all that work, but I did it at night, sort of a precursor to sort of remote law clerking. I used to, if you have kids, I'd make sure they would power nap in the afternoon so I could get some work done then and things like that. So I did that for 11 and a half years, and it was great. But then eventually, actually, one of my law school colleagues, or Barack Obama, was running for president, and I thought, well, maybe I should go do something else. If he's running for president, maybe I could go do something a little bit else. And so I left, and I became a partner at a small firm, Curran Wagstaff. And then I did that for 2 years. And then I was fortunate enough and completely unexpected, I was selected to be a magistrate judge here in the Northern District. And as I said, I'll have done that for 10 years. And I like to share that story because the advice I always give to new lawyers as you're trying to juggle life decisions with work decisions is do what's best for your life, and everything else will flow from that. At the time I made the decision to leave the practice in law and join Judge Breyer, was about a year from partnership. And I pretty much thought that was the end of my career in terms of ambitions. And I've been pretty ambitious. I worked hard. I did law review in law school and all those things. But I thought I was hitting the parent track, mommy track, parent track, and that was going to be it. But at the time, I made that decision with my husband because he had a very demanding job and it was just the right thing for our family. And lo and behold, it worked out. But I always like to say, if it hadn't worked out, if I was still clerking, which would be a great job anyway, or whatever, I would still have made the same decision, because I do think you have to prioritize what's most important in life. And most important in life is your relationships, right? Not your career. Your career is important, but it should enhance your family life and those kinds of things. And I know that's hard, especially when you're a new lawyer, to think about, but I actually do think finding that happiness is the most important thing. So then I get to be a magistrate judge, which I think is super interesting because I sort of have 3 different buckets of things that I do. One is settlement conferences. And this gives me tremendous insight into all, as Judge Davila was saying, the types of civil litigation that we have, which go from patent to civil rights to contract, trade secrets, all this stuff. And as the settlement judge, you get together with the parties in this confidential proceeding. It's quite intimate. And you really get deep into a case, deep into the personalities, into the litigants, into the lawyers. As a judge, it gives me an insight into sort of the inside baseball that goes on in litigation. And we do about more than 100 of these a year. And so of all different subject matters, it really is, it's pretty interesting. It's kind of psychology a little bit. Sometimes one time I had this litigant tell me, oh, I feel like you're my life coach. So I was trying to talk to him about like, wife, they should just take the money and go on a cruise. We had grandkids and those kinds of things. But on the same time, you also have to talk about often the merits of the case. And so you have to be respected that way. So that's pretty fun. The other part in our district, magistrate judges, we have our own caseload as well. The parties have to consent. So they have to sign a piece of paper and they say, we agree to you serving as our trial judge. And then we, just like Judge Davila, appeal from me would be to the Ninth Circuit. And then I actually have a case being argued at the Supreme Court this month. Ramirez versus TransUnion is a trial that I did. And it's now made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, where I'm pretty certain I'm going to get reversed. But I was just following Ninth Circuit law. But it's actually a very big case with respect to the future of class actions and standing of absent class members and things like that. But so we get to do those kinds of things as well. And in our district, we have a very high consent rate. And I have over 200 consent cases right now. We're just very big docket. The nice thing about that is doing the settlements, I feel like as the trial judge, that gives me some insight into what's going on and understanding sometimes when lawyers maybe are taking what I think might be somewhat unreasonable positions. It may be pressure from their clients or that's kind of things, because I see all that in the settlement conference. And then the third bucket that we do is all the pretrial criminal proceedings. So 2 times a year for a month at a time, all like the bail decisions, initial appearances on all felonies and misdemeanors come to see the magistrate judge who's on criminal duty, as well as all the search warrants and pen registers and all those kind of things for that entire month. So that's a entirely different area of law. what I like when you're on duty, you sort of have an idea of all the investigations that are going on in the U.S. Attorney's Office, more than the U.S. attorneys know, because they all come straight to this one magistrate judge. Of course, it's all completely confidential and not to be shared. And then we have to make the decisions as to bail, which is really probably one of the most consequential decisions that's ever made in a federal criminal case, because whether you're out on release on bail or in custody probably affects how much your lawyer and how ease of access to your lawyer and preparing for a trial and those kinds of things. And second, how willing you are maybe to give up your trial right and plead just to get on and get over with, right? You might plead guilty at that point. So it's a very consequential decision, and it's not a legal decision, really. It's really, does the magistrate judge think there are conditions that can be imposed that would allow this person to be free or be released pending resolution of the case? And there is a presumption of release. So a lot of you have probably heard with respect to the January 6th riots, there's been a lot of press about who's been released, who's not released, and some complaining about magistrate judges I've read, or even some district court judges releasing people. And, you know, there is a presumption of release, and you sort of, to detain someone before they've been found guilty, you really have to find that they're a danger to the community or likely to flee. So those are sort of the three buckets that I have, which I think is really one of the best jobs out there.
Thank you so much, Judge Corley, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing. I have a question, and then I might just turn it over to the students just after this one question, just because I think they probably have a lot of questions for you guys. My question is, it's nice to have 4 judges on different seats, because it's probably not a job you can get right out of law school. So I guess I'd like to ask, what if someone who's a student now at UC Hastings is kind of interested in this job as a future career opportunity? What can that person do to put themselves in the best position possible to perhaps one day sit on the bench? And I guess I'll start with Judge Simons. Judge Simons, what do you think? What's some advice you might have to current students?
Well, I would be foolish to contradict the advice that Judge Corley gave, which I think is absolutely right, and that is do what makes sense for your life today, not necessarily what you think will pay off in making you a judge 10 or 15 years from now. But I spend a lot of my time in court having lawyers dodge my questions. So, Scott, I won't dodge your question. I think that being a litigator, doing trials is a preferred route. It's not the only way, certainly, to get to the bench. And you never know what's good pedigree. I mean, when I was a public defender back in the 70s, I don't think there were many public defenders who thought, oh, this is a great route to get a judicial appointment to the bench, to get a governor's appointment to the bench. Probably the district attorney's office would have been a far more likely route. These days, I would think that the public defender's office might even be a better route. So it's hard, I think, to predict in advance what's going to pay off far down the road. But trial work, I think, is good, and it really is important. Ed stressed how close the legal community is and how you're always running into people you know. When Judge Corley mentioned having worked at Kerr and Wagstaff, I was a public defender with Rod Kerr for several years before he left and formed that firm. So you never know, but one thing that you do know is that your reputation arrives in the room before you do. So keep that in mind if you are thinking about becoming a judge, whatever particular area of law you choose to go into, being respected does have its dividends, and being regarded as a jerk rarely pays the benefits that you might think if you get your understanding of the practice of law from television.
Well, thank you, Judge Simons. Let's stick with state court. Judge Greenberg, do you have any other thoughts about how one might become a district judge in the California court system?
So I think I agree definitely with what the other judges have been saying this morning. As for our bench in San Mateo County, the vast majority have been prosecutors. They were in the district attorney's office, either here in San Mateo County or somewhere close. We do have some civil judges who never had a criminal background. The other thing which hasn't been talked about much is to have some political alliances, because I know there are some judges who have been appointed based on kind of who they knew at the time and who they knew up in the governor's office. That's not me. I have no political affiliations or alliances with anybody, but really it is your hard work, and definitely it is your reputation. Bad news travels way faster than good news, and judges talk about the lawyers all the time, and you do have to be an attorney for a minimum amount of time before you're appointed to the bench. So it's all about truth and honesty, even if it's not necessarily what you'd want to have to say. You know, as an officer of the court, you need to say what you need to say. And I've had lawyers say that to me. In fact, just yesterday, Your Honor, as an officer of the court, I have to tell you, I don't think you can do what I'm asking you to do on behalf of my client. That was pretty cool. It was pretty good. So, and of course I agreed, and the district attorney agreed too, but yeah, I don't have much else to add. But
Thank you. Judge Corley, how does one become a magistrate judge?
Well, the only thing I would add in terms of what Judge Greenberg said is be good to your opposing counsel, right? Because it is a small legal community, and those people might be the people who are deciding who's going to become the judges, or will be references for you. Or if you apply, for example, to be a magistrate judge, you have to list all the cases or a number of significant cases and who your opposing counsel is. They're going to call your opposing counsel and they're going to ask him, what did you think of this person, right? And if you were one of those hard-nosed, uncooperative lawyers, that's not going to help. So it's better to practice law in a civil, cooperative way anyway, but even apart from that, the reputation and being someone that people want when they get the case and they learn you're on the other side, that they're happy to hear that, not because you're a pushover and not because you're going to agree with them, but because you're someone who's good to work with.
And Judge Davila.
There we go. You know, there are some countries where you go to law school intending specifically to be a judge. Korea, Japan, France, they have in their schools, they have judicial tracks, and students go and they choose to be a litigator, a patent person or whatever, or a judge, and they go on that track. We don't have that, as my colleagues have told you, and you know that. I agree with Judge Corley, with Jackie and everyone else. The primary, I think the real primary thing you do when you leave law school thinking about whatever career you want is your reputation. And when you practice, you zealously represent your clients. You always do so with the highest degree of ethics and integrity. Always do that. That's your calling card. That's how people will know you. And what you've heard this morning about how we got our jobs, it is a political process. Absolutely is. Governors have committees that review applications. Governors have committees that look in the neighborhoods and say, you know, there's an opening over in Alameda County. Do you know any good lawyers over there who might be on this, might be a good track for them. And those committees will say, yeah, I heard there's this lawyer out there. Her name's Cummins, Danielle Cummins. And man, she is smart. She's got the highest degree of ethics. And I think we should, look for her. Let's talk and see if she's interested. That's how it works. And then somebody reaches out and says, hey, Danielle, you ever thought about doing this? After 10 years, because you have to be a lawyer for 10 years before you can be appointed to Superior Court. And then after that, for a federal position, the president has committees, not personally, he doesn't, but the senators have committees that look up and down the state for appropriate appointments. And Senator Feinstein has a committee, and Senator Padilla is putting his committee together right now. And they've the same thing. They have lawyers who look around. They have the touchstone of the communities, and they say, geez, we've got an opening coming up. Who do you think would be good? Well, I heard Tammy Vu's been doing really good things, and she's a judge over in San Benito County, and maybe we should look at her. Or what about Vina Patia? Maybe she should come in, and we should look at them. Oh, okay. That's how that works. And those names come up, as Judge Corley said, they come up, those names rise to the top because the legal community knows that when those people either come in their courtrooms or they have them as adversary clients, they're not adversarial, they're colleague opposites, as they say. And they're always able to get along. They, again, represent their client, but they don't cheat. They don't, they're completely upfront. And it's a joy to work with clients like that. From a judicial standpoint, it's a joy to have lawyers like that in our courtrooms. It's just an absolute pleasure to have lawyers come in who focus on the facts and leave theatrics outside. Theatrics are sometimes interesting, and they'll come up in the natural course of things, but that's how you get known in the legal community. That really is. And Judge Corley nailed it. When you fill out that application, you put in your cases, and they always ask the opposing counsel, what was Alex Garcia like? What was Trevor Weitzberg like? What was he like being on the opposite side? And those are the people that they really listen to. And we get calls as judges. Sometimes people, because they'll put down in an application, I had a case in front of Judge Corley, I had a case in front of Judge Simons. Okay. And so they'll call us. The committee who reviews those will call us. What were they like? Give us your thoughts about them. So being a lawyer means you're advocating for your client, but you're always in the public eye. And that's the way you should look at it. And I agree with other thing Judge Corley said was when you choose your practice, I don't think it's really worthy to go out and say, I'm going to be a judge as soon as you raise your right hand. Go out and, practice where you find interest and make those decisions that are right for you in the areas. And don't be afraid to change areas. Look at different areas. So just like you did with your classes at Hastings, look at different areas of practice. You'll find some place that's comfortable for you, that excites you, and off you go. Okay.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Let me open it up